This is the Bush Whisperer coming at you from the most beautiful penguin sanctuary, southern tip of Africa, Boulders Beach, Simonstown, Cape Town. I come to talk to you today about using your brain. It's something that we've become accustomed to not doing because we don't have to use our brains anymore. I remember when I was young how I used to have to memorize telephone numbers because I didn't have a cell phone in my pocket. I didn't have an electronic organizer. This was back in the 80s and even into the early 90s. And so you had to get to know people, talk to them in a traditional way, actually go and introduce yourself, actually get to meet people, instead of just sitting behind a keyboard or sitting on your phone, typing out text, pretending to be something you're not. You had to be yourself. You had to learn to be real. Back in the good old days, I call it. And we used to use our brains so much more. We had to do the math of everything that we did in our head. We didn't just have a phone at hand. And unless you carried a calculator in your pocket, which was, well, it would have seemed a ridiculous thing to do in those days. When you've got a calculator in your head, why would you want to carry one in your pocket? So people were more agile mentally. People used their brains a lot more. We used to have to go into libraries and look up things. So we had more respect for knowledge, more respect for information. There wasn't this blasé attitude towards knowledge, or I know better attitude that you see these days in the youth. Oh, I've got Google. I can Google it, and Google knows better. That blind faith attitude. People used to have to think for themselves a lot more. And so we used to do math, and I used to do all sorts of exercises regularly to keep my mind sharp and fit, something we don't do. And I used to actively pursue this. I used to lay in bed at night and I used to play games with shapes in my head, play games with numbers in my head, adding numbers up in different factors to see how high I could count, playing with multiple multiplication factors to see how high I could go, manipulating the numbers in my mind easily. And these are the kind of things that people would do to keep their mind agile. But because of AI, and I'm going to do a specific video on AI, we've become very lazy. We've got a little AI system in our pocket that will basically do everything for us. We don't have to think. We don't have to do anything. We don't even have to know anything. Google will know for you. You don't even have to remember anymore. Google will remember for you. You don't need books. Google will tell you what you need to know. And Google, well, ask yourself, how trustworthy is Google? Would you trust Google to look after your children? Would you trust Google to look after your pets? Would you trust Google to hold a rope while you're hanging off the edge of a mountain? There are questions that need to be answered. We've become so accustomed to trusting Google with our minds, with the information, with our beliefs, trusting Google with the facts. I've heard people try to speak about things as if they know it, having Googled the answer. I've heard people trying to correct me when I'm speaking of etymology. Etymology I've been studying, say, for, I don't know, more than three decades, 3.5 decades. And in the old days, we had to go into actual libraries. We had to study with real books. We had to really work to gain knowledge and understanding. And so the knowledge and the understanding that we did gain when we worked for it, we valued and we treated it with respect. These days, though, people think that they've got all the answers in Google. So somebody will come to you and tell you, I'll give you a classic example, and I did a video about this, the word shaman, where it comes from. I've had all these know-it-alls in shamanic groups trying to tell me, no, the word shaman comes from the 1700s. It comes from that group of Tonga people, which is the outskirts of Russia. And that's where the etymology takes them. And I'm trying to point out to these people, actually, the etymology goes back way, way longer. And they're like, no, they know. They've seen it in Google. They've got the answer. This is the attitude of the young people these days. People that just don't know anything. You point out to them that the word is in the Vedic text from 2,700 years ago. They find some writer somewhere, some fringe writer that believed that it was just a coincidence that the word was Vedic. Oh, so that's the fact now. Google tells them that's the fact, so that's the fact. They don't bother to actually go and read in the Vedas what the word Shraman means, or the word Shramana. And that if they actually read the meaning of these words, they will see that it is the meaning of a shaman. And that the word Shraman actually means the sacred hymns that are sung by the Shramana, who is the sacred journeyer, that person who lives in the wilderness, practicing ascetic meditation techniques with the Damburu drum, chanting these ancient sacred songs of the ancestors in order to enter into a trance so that they can bring healing to the community and to themselves and wisdom and guidance. And that's what a shaman does. So somebody decided that they didn't know much about Vedic science or about Sanskrit language. And this Westerner went and wrote a book. And because this Westerner wrote a book knowing nothing about Vedic languages or Sanskrit or any knowledge about it, decided that it was just a coincidence that that word sounded the same as the word shaman, which came about 2,500 years later after that text was written. And that there's no connection. And so you've got these delusions that are passing for knowledge, and people are walking around trying to say that that's where shamanism comes from, which is just total nonsense. Shamanism is a universal practice that's older than all traditions of esoteric and occult literature, older than all religions. It's the fundamental, it's the primary connection with the divine. It comes back to the early days of humanity developing the spiritual powers and learning to connect with the spiritual reality through nature, where nature becomes the expression from within. So it's universal. Anybody who's practicing shamanism would understand that you find shamanism in nature, and you can remember from the ancient eyes of the ancient ones, our ancestors that walked. The memories are all here in our consciousness, stored in our DNA in what they call junk DNA, 98% of all of our DNA, ancestral memories. So to understand that Google doesn't have any answers, really. The AI system that runs Google that's going to tell you what the truth is a child. It's only been around for a little while. We're letting a little child tell us the truth. We're letting like a 10-year-old child dictate what is and isn't knowledge. There's something wrong with this concept. Yeah, AI has its uses. AI can be functionally used. It's great for running factories. It's great for organizing resource transportation. It's great for cataloging information and helping you access particular pieces of information. It's not great for writing poetry. It's great for plagiarizing all different pieces of poetry all around the web and presenting it in a coherent structure so that it seems as if it's original poetry, but it's not real poetry. Real poetry comes from human consciousness. So this is something to consider, something to realize. How we've allowed our brains to become decrepit and allow this AI system to take over our thinking for us and our beliefs and our knowledge. I think we need to start reclaiming our brains. We need to start reading books. And these days, you can find audiobooks. It's actually the easiest time to read ever. You don't even have to go through the rigmarole of your eyes looking at words. You can hear books being read to you because it's so readily available because of the internet. We should be embracing information and knowledge and finding our own truths like we used to in the old days. I believe that knowledge is fundamental to the progression of the spiritual path. And self-knowledge comes from understanding our place in the world. But it begins with a grounded perception of reality, a grounded perception of the world we live in order to understand our place in the world, so that we can understand who we are moving through this world. Do share, do like this video. Subscribe so you don't miss the daily uploads. This is the Bush Whisperer sharing a few words about how we've allowed our brains to become decrepit, or are allowing our intelligence to pass. from us. Keep it real, keep it sweet. Seek the knowledge, seek it with joy. Let it become a hobby. I did a great video on hobbies. Find it. And this teaching course works best if you follow it from the beginning to the end, sequentially. That way you're able to coherently put the information together, because you'll find that there's a coherency in the way that this teaching course is presented. And at the moment, it's obviously way over 100 videos. Depends on when I load up this video. I take time and contemplation to load the videos in the correct sequence, or in the sequence that seems to make the most sense to one that is achieving a level of understanding and wisdom in the world, or moving in that direction. I hope you have an absolutely gorgeous day. Enjoy yourself. Keep it real. Keep it sweet. Don't forget to smile. And don't let Google think for you, whatever you do. Become your own thinker. Become an individual. Become originally deciphered. This is the Bush Whisperer coming at you. Have a lovely day. Om Shanti.